Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. Sometimes the worst betrayal gives you the greatest gift, your freedom. My name is Charles, and this is the story of how my wife's affair finally gave me the courage to chase the life I'd always wanted, while she was busy living hers with someone else. Rachel and I got married 4 years ago through matchmaking. My aunt knew her family, thought we'd be a good match on paper, both college-educated, similar backgrounds, stable careers. We were both approaching 30 and tired of the dating scene, so an introduction seemed practical. Looking back, that should have been the first red flag. Marriage should be about love, not convenience. The wedding was beautiful, our families were thrilled, and for about 6 months, we played house like newlyweds are supposed to. But the fundamental problem was obvious from the start: we'd never actually fallen in love with each other. We were two people sharing an apartment and a last name, going through the motions of what we thought marriage should look like. By year 2, the cracks were showing. We'd have these circular arguments about everything: money, chores, plans. Nothing felt natural or easy between us. We weren't building a life together, we were just existing in the same space, getting more frustrated with each other as time went on. I work in affiliate marketing, running several websites that promote software and online courses. It's completely location-independent work. All I need is a laptop and a decent internet connection. For the past 3 years, I'd been dreaming about relocating somewhere with a lower cost of living, better weather, and maybe a more relaxed pace of life. Countries like Thailand, Costa Rica, or parts of Eastern Europe, where my income could go 3 times as far. The numbers were compelling. My business was generating a substantial amount each month, which was decent in Phoenix but would be incredible abroad. I could afford a much bigger apartment, eat out regularly, travel around the region, and maybe even hire help for my business. Instead, we were cramped in a tiny 2-bedroom rental, stressed about bills, and never able to save much despite my decent income. Every time I brought up the possibility of moving abroad, Rachel would shut it down immediately. Her family was everything to her. Her parents, sister, cousins, aunts, and uncles all lived within an hour of Phoenix. She'd grown up having Sunday dinners at her grandmother's house, weekly coffee dates with her sister, and spontaneous barbecues with her cousins. The idea of being more than a few miles from this support system seemed to terrify her. I understood family loyalty, but it felt like she was choosing them over our marriage, over our future, over any possibility of growth or adventure. When I'd point out the financial benefits of relocating, she'd accuse me of being selfish, of trying to isolate her from everyone she loved. When I'd mention the travel opportunities or cultural experiences, she'd say I was being unrealistic, chasing fantasies instead of building a stable life. These discussions always ended the same way, with Rachel crying, me feeling guilty, and the subject getting shelved for months until I'd work up the courage to bring it up again from another direction. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own life, watching other digital nomads on social media living the exact lifestyle I wanted while I stayed trapped by someone else's need for geographical security. I also observed how my wife seems to resent my success. My business had a particularly good month. Instead of celebrating with me, she said I was lucky, and my work wasn't real work compared to her job at a marketing agency. I can't tell if she seemed threatened by the fact that I had options. By year 3, we were basically roommates who shared a last name. We slept in separate bedrooms after too many nights of tense silence. We'd eat dinner while scrolling our phones, barely speaking beyond logistics about bills or household tasks. I'd work from the living room during the day. She'd come home tired and irritated from her office job, and we'd avoid each other until bedtime. I started planning my exit strategy, researching divorce lawyers, and trying to figure out how to divide our minimal assets. But every time I got close to filing papers, Rachel would seem to have a good day, be affectionate for a week, and I'd convince myself things might improve. I was stuck in this cycle of hope and disappointment, too comfortable with the familiar misery to take action. I also didn't want to disappoint my family.
TheBreaking.com on a Tuesday morning.
Rachel announced, while I took my morning coffee, that she had a family emergency and needed to leave town immediately. She was vague about the details, only saying it was serious and she needed to be there for support. I didn't question it much initially. Family emergencies happen, and despite our problems, I wasn't going to be the husband who prevented his wife from helping or being there for her family member. Rachel seemed genuinely stressed, making phone calls and texting constantly while throwing clothes into her luggage. She said she wasn't sure how long she'd be gone, maybe a few days, maybe a week, depending on the situation. part of me was actually relieved. The tension in our apartment had been particularly thick lately, and having some space might help both of us reset. I told her to keep me updated. She promised to call when she got there and let me know what was happening with the situation. The first few days were peaceful. I worked without interruption, ordered takeout from places Rachel didn't like, and watched movies she'd complain about. I caught up on projects I'd been putting off. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed in my own home. Rachel called twice, once when she got there to say she'd made it safely, and once the next evening to say her sister was doing better, but still needed support. The conversations were brief. I asked if there was anything I could do to help, but Rachel said the situation was under control and she'd update me as things developed. On Friday, for days after she'd left, Rachel called with news that completely blindsided me. She said the crisis had been resolved. Apparently it wasn't as serious as they'd initially thought. But now, since the whole family was already gathered in Denver, they decided to take a vacation together. They were going to rent a cabin in the mountains for about 2 weeks to have family bonding time. I was stunned. A vacation? Right after a family emergency? The timeline didn't make sense. If my wife's sister had been in a genuine crisis requiring Rachel's immediate presence, how were they suddenly in vacation mode? And why hadn't this family trip been mentioned before? I'd been married to Rachel for 4 years and had never heard about planned gatherings in Denver or cabins in the mountains. I managed to keep my voice neutral during the call, telling Rachel to have fun and that I'd see her when she got back. But after hanging up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The whole story felt constructed, like pieces of truth arranged to hide a bigger lie. That weekend, I did something I'd never done before. I started investigating my own wife. I checked her social media, which she'd always kept fairly private, but her sister's Instagram was public. I scrolled through her recent posts, looking for any sign of the supposed crisis or family vacation. What I found made my stomach drop. There was no indication of any emergency, no family gathering, no vacation plans. If Rachel was supposedly helping her sister through some crisis, she certainly wasn't acting like someone who needed help. I dug deeper, checking Facebook, looking at mutual friends' posts, even doing some basic online searches. That's when I found the first real clue, a photo posted by Rachel's cousin, whom I'd met at family gatherings. It showed him at a restaurant in Aspen, Colorado, with a group of people. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, were Rachel and a man I recognized as my wife's coworker. He worked at the same marketing agency as Rachel. I'd mentioned my discomfort about their relationship before, but she dismissed my concerns as jealousy and insisted they were just colleagues and friends. Seeing them together in Aspen, on what was supposed to be a family emergency trip to help her sister, confirmed what I'd been trying not to believe for months. Rachel wasn't helping with a crisis. She was on vacation with her lover, and some of her family members were either complicit or completely oblivious to the deception. I spent the next 2 days gathering more evidence, not because I needed it for legal reasons, but because I needed to be absolutely certain before I made any major decisions. I found more photos, cross-referenced locations, and even discovered that this coworker had posted vacation photos from the same resort. The betrayal went deeper than just the affair. Rachel had used a fake emergency to justify leaving, had involved her family in the deception, and was now vacationing with another man while I sat home believing she was being a supportive sister. The level of planning and manipulation required for this scheme was breathtaking. But instead of feeling devastated, I felt something unexpected, relief. This was the sign I'd been waiting for, the clear indication that my marriage was beyond saving. Rachel had made her choice, and now I could make mine. For years, she'd used emotional manipulation and family guilt to keep me tied to Phoenix, to keep me from pursuing the life I wanted. She'd made me feel selfish for wanting to move abroad, made me prioritize her comfort over my dreams. But now, with her gone and our marriage effectively over, I finally had the freedom to act. I thought about confronting her, demanding explanations, creating drama, and forcing conversations about our relationship. But what would be the point? Rachel had shown me exactly how much our marriage meant to her. Instead of wasting energy on someone who'd already chosen someone else, I decided to use this time to choose myself. That Sunday night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Rachel wanted to abandon our marriage for another man, I would abandon our shared life for the future I'd always wanted. She'd given me the perfect opportunity, time, freedom, and moral justification to finally pursue my dreams without guilt or negotiation. I started planning immediately. Rachel was supposed to be gone for another week, which gave me limited time to execute a complete life change. I'd been planning relocation for years, so I knew exactly what needed to happen. The difference now was that I didn't need anyone's permission or approval. On Monday morning, I thought about calling a divorce lawyer and scheduling a consultation for that afternoon, but I changed my mind. Since we had no children and minimal shared property, the process would be relatively straightforward. Next, I started liquidating everything I didn't absolutely need. I posted everything on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and OfferUp. Within 2 days, strangers were coming to our apartment, buying our entire shared life piece by piece. The speed of it was actually therapeutic. Every item sold felt like shedding weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The dining room set Rachel had insisted we buy for entertaining, we never did, sold to a young couple for half what we'd paid. I kept only what would fit in 2 suitcases and a backpack. Laptop, essential clothes, important documents, and a few sentimental items from before my marriage. Everything else became someone else's problem and someone else's joy. While selling furniture, I was simultaneously handling financial logistics. I closed our joint checking and savings accounts, withdrawing my half and opening new accounts solely in my name. I converted most of my savings to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and Ethereum that I could access from anywhere in the world without dealing with international banking complications. The business transition was straightforward since everything was already in my name. I updated my address with clients and vendors to a forwarding service, made sure all payments were going to accounts Rachel couldn't access, and confirmed that I could operate everything remotely from Thailand. By Wednesday, our apartment looked like we were moving out. By Friday, it looked like we'd been robbed. I'd sold or donated almost everything, kept the essentials in storage, and booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok with a connection to Chiang Mai. My flight was scheduled for Sunday, the day before Rachel was supposed to return from her family vacation. The logistics were surprisingly simple once I committed to the decision. Years of research and planning meant I knew exactly which visa to apply for, which neighborhoods in Chiang Mai had good internet and reasonable rent, and which airlines had the best routes to Thailand. I'd been preparing for this move for so long that executing it felt like finally pressing play on a video I'd paused years ago. Friday evening, I walked through our nearly empty apartment one last time. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed, and most of our shared memories had been sold to strangers. I felt no sadness, no regret, just anticipation for what came next. I left Rachel's belongings, her clothes, personal items, anything clearly hers, neatly packed in boxes in a storage facility. The landlord already knew I was breaking the lease early and had my forwarding information for the security deposit. Sunday morning, I loaded my luggage into an Uber and headed to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. As we drove through the city I'd called home for 4 years, I tried to feel nostalgic or sentimental about leaving. Instead, I felt like someone who'd been holding their breath underwater and was finally swimming to the surface. The flight to Bangkok was long but exciting. I'd booked business class using points I'd been saving for years. For 14 hours, I read books about Thai culture, planned my first week's itinerary, and thought about the business opportunities one might explore in Southeast Asia. I landed in Bangkok on Tuesday morning. Chiang Mai exceeded my expectations immediately. The cost of living was even lower than I'd researched, the internet was fast enough for all my business needs, and the weather was perfect. By the next day, I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in the Niman area for less than I'd been paying for utilities back in Phoenix. 3 days later, I was setting up my workspace in a local cafe when I got the first contact from Rachel. She'd found me on Instagram, the only social media account I hadn't deleted or blocked her from yet. Her message was exactly what I'd expected, a mix of shock, anger, and demands for explanations. She wanted to know where I was and why she couldn't get access to our house. She had no idea where I was, but she felt I was running away from our family problems instead of working through them. She demanded that I come back immediately so we could talk like adults about our issues. I read her message while sitting in a Thai cafe. Her words felt like they were coming from a different universe, a place I'd escaped from rather than a life I'd left behind. My response was brief and practical. I told her where her remaining belongings were stored, gave her the contact information for the storage facility, and explained that she'd need to handle the lease termination with our landlord. I mentioned that I'd left information about dividing our remaining shared assets with my lawyer and that she could contact him directly. I didn't explain my reasons for leaving, didn't justify my decisions, and didn't engage with her emotional appeals or accusations. After 4 years of having every choice scrutinized and every dream dismissed, I wasn't interested in defending my right to pursue happiness. She responded immediately with a longer message, this time trying guilt and manipulation. She never mentioned that she was on a trip with another man. One thing she said was that we could work through our problems if I'd just come home and talk. But it was too late. I'd already tasted freedom, already experienced what it felt like to make decisions based on my own happiness rather than someone else's comfort. I'd remembered who I was before I'd started compromising every dream for the sake of a marriage that was never really working. I blocked her number and her social media accounts. Rachel had already made her choice when she planned that elaborate deception to vacation with another man. I was simply making mine. 6 months later, I'm still in Thailand, and it's everything I'd hoped for and more. My business has actually grown since relocating. The lower cost of living means I can reinvest more profits, and the time difference works well for client calls with both American and European markets. I've made friends with other expats, learned basic Thai, and explored temples and national parks I'd only seen in photos before. I live in a beautiful apartment that costs less than I used to spend on groceries in Phoenix. I eat amazing food, get massages that cost $5, and work from cafes and co-working spaces filled with like-minded people building location-independent careers. Most importantly, I wake up every day excited about my life instead of dreading another day of tension and compromise. I make decisions based on what I want rather than what someone else will tolerate. I'm building the life I always knew was possible, but had convinced myself was selfish to pursue. I heard through mutual friends that Rachel is divorcing me, but does it matter? I don't know if she had struggles adjusting without me. I just feel grateful that her betrayal finally gave me permission to stop waiting for someone else's approval to live my own life. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. If you're in a relationship where you're constantly deferring your dreams for someone who doesn't share them, where you're making yourself smaller to avoid conflict, where you're accepting betrayal because confrontation feels harder than continuation, consider that maybe the problem isn't your dreams, it's your situation. Everyone deserves a partner who celebrates their ambitions rather than limiting them, who sees their happiness as a priority rather than a threat, who chooses them consistently rather than looking for alternatives while keeping them as backup. I'm not saying everyone should pack up and move to Thailand, but everyone should feel free to pursue the life that makes them excited to wake up each morning. Don't wait for permission from someone who's already decided you're not their first choice. Sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't confrontation or forgiveness, it's freedom.